In the spring of 1975, Master Sergeant Rene, a 514th Wing Loadmaster, was assigned to a mission to transport Vietnamese orphans from Vietnam to new homes in the United States. As Saigon was falling to the North Vietnamese, 4 C-141 transport aircraft were dispatched. Only 2 were able to land at Tan Son Nhut Air Base in Saigon. Rene quickly loaded 189 passengers, secured the aircraft, took off, narrowly escaping enemy fire. Working as he did that day, he was able to save the lives of numerous young Vietnamese orphans to start a brand new life in the United States.
When you were alerted for the mission, when did you first find out what you were going to do?
Well, I basically just build up to what was happening. It was the last days of the Vietnam conflict. It was the last days of the Vietnam conflict, and just about everything that was flyable was committed to the evacuation and the end of the war. So there was hundreds of airplanes out in the system, and we had been out in the system about 5 or 6 days at that point in time. And we were alerted to fly, and Sergeant Dunphy and I were out in Okinawa. We loaded up our airplane with 10 pallets of mattresses. There were quite a few refugee camps being set up in the Pacific at that time, and we were going to take mattresses to Guam for one of the refugee camps. And we had the airplane loaded. We were waiting for the rest of the crew to come out. And command post came out and said to Sergeant Dunphy and I that you have to go to the armory and check out weapons. And I remember saying to the sergeant who came out, I said, I thought Guam was on our side. And he said, you're not going to Guam. He said, you're going in country. We're going to download your airplane. And I remember saying to Dunphy and Herbie Halls, the other engineer, I said, we were under the opinion that it was over, that you could not get into the country anymore. And so the pilot, we went to the armory, we checked out 2 ARs, and we came back to the airplane. The pilots were there, and then Major Delore briefed us on where we were going, what we were doing.
Was Captain Aubrey was the other
Captain
pilot?
Aubrey was the co-pilot. We were told that there was radio contact with a group, I believe sponsored by the Pearl S. Buck Foundation, who ran orphanages in Vietnam. And there was a load of babies, passengers, we really didn't know what it was, that were trying to get out of there, and they were at Tan Son Nhut, and they were just hoping they could get out before the base was overrun.
And Tan Son Nhut was the airport serving Saigon.
Yeah, yeah. And there was 4-plane formation, there was 3 active duty airplanes, and we were the only associate crew at that time that was chosen for the mission. And because of our experience, it was strictly a VFR situation. There was no radio contact with Tan Son Nhut at that time. We were staying in contact with a Navy vessel off the coast. And
the aids to navigation were unreliable, so you were going in really by the seat of your pants.
Right, and you had to strictly go in VFR because Ben Hoa is just north of Tan Son Nhut. And if anybody got mixed up going into Ben Hoa had already fallen, and they were already into Saigon itself. So we were lead ship, and we flew in, we landed, pulled off on a taxiway, and left the engines running. We put ourselves in a position where we could leave immediately if we had to. We had no idea, we had nobody to talk to. The second plane landed, turned around and took right back off, and the other 2 aircraft never landed. So we were the only one that landed. So we sat there for, what seems like an eternity. I went outside, we left the airplane running, everybody in their position. I went out on the long cord and was reporting what I saw, and it was really nothing until...
Were you armed at that point? Or?
Yes. I had the M16 plus my sidearm. And one vehicle appeared, started to come up, I could see it, and I said to the cockpit, I said, I don't know who's coming, but I said, there's a vehicle coming up behind the airplane. and it was a blue Air Force vehicle, and two Vietnamese got out, and I was trying to listen to them with the noise of the engines, and they had broken into the PX on base, and they were trying to sell me Saigon elephants. So I said to Major DeLauder, I said, "You want a Saigon elephant?" And it was a, "Say what?" I said, "You want us, these guys are selling Saigon elephants." So that was the comical part of it, and then they left, and we were just debating whether to get out of there or not, because it was not the best place to be. There was smoke coming up all over the perimeter. So
Were these just fires, or were these?
no, when we came in, you saw
were these incursion fires?
You could see in Saigon that there was a lot going on in Saigon. So there was a couple minutes later, some other vehicles started to come up behind us, and again I said to Lauder, I said, "I don't know who these people are." So anyway, once they got within a couple hundred yards, they put a white flag out. They saw I was armed, and they put a diaper out as a white flag. And the buses pulled up, and a minister, a Lutheran minister, was in the one bus. He came up to me, and he said, "Come on back here." He said, "We're really glad to see you guys." And I went back to the buses and looked in. There was 3 buses. And I just got back on headset, and I said to DeLauder, I said, "We got a mess here." I said, you should probably shut down the engines and just leave the APU running, because we had no service, no nothing. We couldn't get fuel. We would have a lot of fuel. And Dunphy opened the back doors. We put one ramp down, and what we had 14 adults and about 78 babies. And I mean babies. Some of them were this big, just in the diapers. Some of them could walk. There was a couple maybe this big, but that was it. Now we had a bare cargo aircraft. We had a bare cargo-only configuration.
So you've got a flat floor.
It's just a bare floor.
And
we had
web seats on the side.
And we had normal 8 blankets for a crew and 8 pillows, and that's all we had. And so we put straps across about every 10 feet, cargo straps across, and we sat the adults backwards, and then put children in between them, because we had to make a max power takeoff out of there. And the max power takeoff, the 141, basically goes up like that, and it puts a lot of pressure on whatever's in the
So they
car.
were in little cribs that you...
No cribs. We had every 10 feet we had an adult, and we had the babies in between to stop them from rolling to the back.
So the babies themselves were strapped to the floor.
Babies were just laying on the floor, laying on the bare floor with an adult every 10 feet between them to try to stop them from rolling to the back of the aircraft when we made the max power takeoff. We couldn't go over the perimeter of the base. It was too dangerous. We just went up and went out over the ocean. When we got out over the ocean, it was a mess. Almost all of them had rolled into the back of the airplane. It was just a pile of people. So we started to make some semblance of order out of that. We tried to move people around and get people situated. We put our 8 blankets on the floor. We put some of the babies there. It was just it was a mess. And after about an hour out, we had things kind of stabilized. We had no floor heat. Our floor heat was broken, or inoperative, and the kids were all freezing to death just about. We gave them our flight jackets, we gave them clothing we had, whatever, that was all we had. And I was walking back up to the front of the airplane, and under one of our web seats that was down, in between the fuselage and the cargo lock, I saw this baby. It was this big. It had rollen into the cargo locks down there. And we had been going an hour up with no floor heat. So I took the infant out, I put it up on the web seat, and there was just no motion whatsoever. It was doing absolutely nothing. So I started tapping on its chest, I opened its mouth, I cleared it out a little bit, and I saw a little movement in the arms, so I put my oxygen mask on it at 100% and put it in my flight jacket, and I handed it to a woman there. And she then held the child until we landed in the Philippines.
Okay, you went to Clark Air Base in the Philippines.
We went down to Clark, and then there was hundreds of volunteers down there. We handed the babies off to them, and they all left, and there we were sitting on the ramp. Everybody was gone. And we thought we were going to crew rest. We already had 16 to 17 hours into our day. And about 20-some pages were write-ups on the airplane with several red X's.
Okay, these are malfunctions on the airplane, things that are wrong mechanically with the airplane.
The airplanes were out in the system. We were flying the heck out of them, and there was limited maintenance every place you went, or parts. And if it wasn't really broke, you continued flying it. So when we landed at Clark, we had 2 generators out, and 2 generators running. And we thought we were done for the day, going to crew rest. They had ramp saturation in the Philippines at that time, which means there was no place to park in the airplane. They couldn't keep us. And they also didn't have maintenance for us. The only maintenance that could fix our airplane was in Okinawa. So they loaded us back up with cargo and sent us back to Okinawa. So that day we went Okinawa, Vietnam, Clark, Philippines, back to Okinawa. We had over 20 hours into our day, and when we landed in Okinawa with an airplane that wasn't going anywhere after Okinawa.
Yeah.
And we really didn't, to us it was an interesting day at the office, but it was just another day at the office. And next day we were alerted to fly again, and we saw on the Stars and Stripes and some of the local newspapers news of the last Babylift that came out of Vietnam, and it was us.
You're the last airplane out.
We were the last airplane out of there, yeah. And then when we got back to McGuire, there was newspaper people waiting for us. The news had gotten back, I guess, probably through the Pearl S. Buck Foundation itself, that these last babies did get out of there. And it was a pretty interesting day.
And many of these children were the children of GIs. Who
That was the story. These orphanages were set up, that these were children that were born of American servicemen, mixed with the Vietnamese. And I don't know that for a fact. They were just babies. But and on the aircraft that day, we only had one person that spoke English. Two. There was a Vietnamese officer who had worked closely with the U.S. government, who had to get out of there, and there was this Lutheran minister who was part of the entourage.
And he was on the airplane.
Yeah, he left with us. Yeah, as did the 3 drivers of whoever was driving the buses. They just pulled the buses off onto the grass, and they hopped on the airplane.
Wow. Have you ever made contact with people who were involved in that Babylift in the years since this happened?
The answer is yes. I saw an advertisement for a 30th year anniversary of the fall of Saigon, and given by the Pearl S. Buck Foundation with the refugees. And I called and I said I was one of the last planes that got out of there with the babies, and they said they would like to have me come down and, the ceremony. And when I walked in, this one gentleman came up. He found out who I was. He came up and saluted and said thank you. And he was a Vietnamese officer who left that day. There were several other, I remember this one gentleman, probably in his 30s at that time. This was the 30th anniversary. He was one of the babies, and he was a doctor in Washington, and he came up and said thanks, and it was verified that he was on that airplane, and at that time he was an infant.
Mm-hmm.
So it was
Wow.
it was pretty neat to see where a lot of these people who were there, the babies, which are not babies anymore, they were in their 30s, but they were a lot of professional people, businessmen, doctors, and it was pretty neat to see what happened.
Gives you a good feeling, doesn't
Yeah,
it?
yeah, it was nice. Especially being enlisted man and getting saluted. Babylift.